Welcome, everyone, to our live coverage of the 2019 Devils Development Camp 3-on-3 tournament. Chris Westcott and Amanda Stein from NewJerseyDevils.com here at the RWJBarnabas Health Hockey House at the Prudential Center, and we'll bring you all the action on the ice live for the next hour or so. We'll be joined by special guests throughout the broadcast, and we'll talk Devils and all things hockey. This won't be much play-by-play, Amanda, but at least we can discuss things and we can talk. There's two separate games going on at once, so we won't be able to bring you that kind of action, but you can watch.
You can't call two games at one time?
I can
who
try.
are you?
I can try. It'll just be a jumble of noise and names and roster numbers, but we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk a lot of Devils stuff. I mean, obviously, it's a couple days into camp here, and there's been some storylines that have come out that we've been interested in pursuing, and of course, it's still early in the week, so we'll be talking about a lot of stuff, a lot of great content on NewJerseyDevils.com. But so far in camp, what have been some of your observations?
Well, it's been very early. Let's remark that. As you said, it's definitely been very early and only 2 on-ice sessions. This is the 3rd time that the guys are on the ice when it comes to being in an organized fashion. But, I think the main observation for me after the first day, these are guys who are warming up after being away from the ice for a while. Keep in mind that when players come to development camp, they haven't necessarily been on the ice for a while. They've been working on their off-ice regimen for the summer. So a lot of the guys speaking to them in the locker room, they're like, ooh, that was a little bit tough just because their legs are getting warmed up. So I think today is going to be a really interesting time to see how those competitive juices start flowing because they're in an actual competition mode now with the 3-on-3 tournament. So this is really exciting. This is the first chance for a lot of the fans to see Jack Hughes live. Of course, that's someone that a lot of people have their eyes on, rightfully so. And for me, it's exciting because you've heard a lot about him, I've heard a lot about him, but yesterday, watching him in practice was actually the first time I've ever seen him on the ice live in a sporting context.
And it was it's kind of fun to watch him skate. He's got great edge work, the way he bends down low, the way that he cuts the corners, even something as little bit as warming up before practice yesterday. You just notice he has a little extra step on some of these guys that are participating.
And that's one of the things that made him, so valuable as that first overall pick, is that he does have a well-rounded game already at just 18 years old. It's remarkable. Now, obviously, things will be a transition for him when he starts playing against men in the NHL, but, by all indications, he has the temperament, the talent, the mentality to adapt as quickly as they need be.
There's a little bit, maybe not a lot at stake in a development camp like this, but you guys, you have some roster bubble players. You've got some camp invites that are obviously trying to stand out. Competitive juices are flowing when you're an athlete. So a tournament like this is a lot of fun to watch how these guys match up against each other.
It is, and one of the things, this is my 3rd Devils training development camp that I've covered, and one of the things that I've really realized over the course of this and talking to whoever's running the camp or management, things like that, is there is less of a focus in a way on the on-ice performance. These guys know a lot of what these kids can do on the ice because you have the scouts and the management and coaching staff watching them throughout the year. A lot of it, we have to remember there's a huge focus about off-ice when it comes to development camp, learning to be a pro. And I think we throw that around really loosely, I'm here to learn to be a pro, but there is a lot that goes into it, whether it's, the basics of nutrition, how to recover from a long road trip or a short road, all those minute little details. That's where they're gaining a lot of their knowledge, is by coming here and the seminars that they're hosting, the people that they're meeting throughout that process. Sometimes some of the veterans come in and pop their head in and speak. So this is an opportunity for these young players to sort of get a minor taste of what it takes to be in the NHL.
Well, we want to remind fans as we cut down to the ice that you can tweet us your questions, and we'll talk about them all throughout the broadcast, and we'll also have some special guests on later today as well, and you'll be able to ask them questions as well. Use the hashtag NJD3v3, and then we'll be able to answer some of your fan questions. I did, actually. You know what? I'm a little bit of a poet, I'm a writer by nature. But as we cut down to the ice, you'll see we have 2 teams going. We have 4 teams going on 2 separate sides of the ice right now. Jack Hughes and his teammates on our far right, and then on the far left, another set of teams here. So this is kind of fun. There's a lot of hockey action going, 3-on-3, cross ice, small quarters, small spaces, quick changes as well. You'll hear the whistles blowing almost nonstop as 4 different teams get their line changes. We just got a nice goal.
That was very nice, yeah.
That was really good. When we look at what we're looking in a 3-on-3 format, what I like to see is playmaking ability.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of space when you do this cross ice. There's usually a lot of space between 2 and 3. But now when you do cross ice,
not here.
And what we're looking for is guys out in front of the net, getting to the dirty areas and finding their teammates as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you're seeing already with some of these guys, they're just taking quick shots, rip shots right in front of the net, because you're right, the space is absolutely limited, as you can hear the crowd kind of, respond to some of the goals that are being scored. And it's interesting because you've got this really great group of young guys versus guys who had quite a bit of experience in the NHL last year. So they're kind of leading the way. Joey Anderson just scored a pretty nice goal. He stepped right over the mini board that they have there and went right in on Brady there, Cole Brady. So this is, I like seeing how many fans are here today, too.
Yeah,
I mean, they're all around the ice.
Amanda, they were lined up around the block outside of the
Get used to that. I mean, they get used to that. I've seen it, and that's the really, great thing. And, we mentioned Jack Hughes. Ty Smith is another guy that I get asked about a lot. Yeah, last year's first-round selection, 17th overall. I think he may, he has like a lot of aura around him for a 17th overall pick. Not that that's nothing, but that is still pretty high in the draft. But he's an interesting guy to watch. I'm watching him on the ice. He just stepped back on the ice for his maybe third shift here, and he's so much bigger than what we saw last year when he was here. He, had a smaller frame. Even just watching him match up against, he's right next to Brett Cini right now, which I guess sometimes it's not that hard to look too big against Brett Cini, but he's really put on a lot of weight. He said yesterday, in the good way, by the way, put on, not the way you and I put on weight.
It's more about muscle mass than,
exactly.
sweets, right?
He said that he put on about 7 pounds already from the time that he was here last year, and he feels a lot more physically mature and mentally mature as well. And he was one of the last cuts last year. That infamous behind the glass scene where he gets cut on camera, says that he gets sent that video a couple of times a day almost, especially right after it happened. Said he watched it once and doesn't want to see it again, but has used that as a motivating factor. And you can really see what he's done with his season with the Spokane Chiefs last year, and then coming into development camp this year, and then moving towards training camp in a couple weeks.
Well, CHL Defenseman of the Year is no joke. I mean,
Nope.
We've seen some of the lists of players that have been awarded that, and we know what he can bring on the offensive side of things. Obviously, talked about it a lot before he got drafted, but he really worked on his defensive game in the last year or so, and it really showed, and that's why he won that award.
And that's one of the things that made him such a desirable defenseman is his offensive game. He had incredible numbers for the Spokane Chiefs last year, led in pretty much every defensive category, but he said, when I went back, I knew, because the coaching staff in New Jersey told me that one of the focuses they wanted me to work on was my defensive game. And you can see that that has really been a strong focus for him on the ice. And you mentioned it, Defenseman of the Year, you're no slouch when you're like that. So lots of eyes on Ty Smith, number 24, as he's here for Dev Camp. And, having talked to him last year in his first year when everything is new, you're coming into a new rink, you don't know anyone, you don't know the staff, you don't know your way around the building. He's coming out of his shell a little more. He's a shy guy just by nature, but he really appears to be coming out of his shell. And I think that it's processes like this at development camp that allow players to familiarize themselves with organizations, whether it's culturally or building and all those things, and gives them the opportunity to feel more comfortable.
You know what I like to see, Amanda? I like when a second-year guy, this is second development camp, and you come in and they carry themselves, like you said, like a veteran.
Yep.
And they notice that the young players are kind of looking up to them, and Ty Smith talked about that a little bit. And some of these other these are still young prospects, but they carry themselves as veterans in a camp like this, and that's really good to see. And I think that's an indication of the culture that the Devils are trying to build, which is help each other, be teammates, be there for each other, and it just seems to be showing so far.
Well, sometimes people laugh because we do throw around the word brotherhood quite a bit, especially since I've been here. It's a word that's kind of followed the Devils and the culture, but there's a lot of value in that. There's a lot of value in that word and what it means to members of this team, whether you're on the NHL roster or coming up through the ranks. There's a lot of meaning behind being a brother, on the ice, off the ice, stepping up for each other, all those kinds of things that you see when the Devils had an injury-riddled season last year, but it was next man up mentality. That all goes into what that slogan of brotherhood means. And these guys, they have it on their sweaters here, even today at development camp. So It's all about the culture, and I think that really starts at the top with Ray Shero and bringing in John Hines and the way that he's been able to really instill that in everybody around him.
Well, Amanda, just a quick update before we take a short break and our first guest joins us. Just a quick update. There are a couple players not participating in the on-ice. Could you give us a quick injury update for the fans that are listening?
So you've got Fabian Zetterlund and Arne Talvidi who are not participating in the on-ice sessions. When it comes to Zetterlund, I think he's a little bit more advanced in his recovery. They both had in-season injuries, so they're both recovering with knee issues. Zetterlund was on the ice yesterday for some of the drills, so that's a really good sign, but we haven't seen Talvidi yet. The indication is that he won't be participating in on-ice stuff, but they are here, again, to go to what we were talking about, Chris, the importance of learning the culture, learning the building, learning the room, all those things. That's been really important, and they need to participate in that, and they are here in that capacity.
All right, thanks a lot, Amanda. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, our first guest of this live stream joins us, Julie Robenheimer, contributing writer for NewJerseyDevils.com. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in just a moment. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to RWJBarnabas Health Hockey House at the Prudential Center. Chris Westcott and Amanda Stein joining you for a live broadcast of the 3-on-3 tournament here at the Devils Development Camp. We now bring in our first guest of the show, Julie Robenheimer. Julie, thanks for joining us.
You bet. Happy to be here.
Well, Julie, fans would know you, obviously, from doing some Devils reports, but also absconding across overseas to do all these tournaments and obviously doing some prospect coverage for us as well at NewJerseyDevils.com. Julie, this week you've been working on some pieces about some of the guys who have played for Binghamton, and what have been some of your observations just talking with them and some of the storylines that have come up?
Well, I think the biggest point of emphasis is that the Devils have been trying to change the culture of the program. That goes from all phases, from development, from prospects, to their AHL guys, and all the way up to the NHL locker room. And so if you look at it, the core of this group here is the first draft class of Ray Shero, Paul Crastron, and John Hines. So you're seeing the development of not only their skills, but of the character that they want to develop in the locker room. And that's what you see in terms of the camaraderie and the chemistry and just the bond that these guys have, especially in Binghamton. They've been through a tough 2 years, haven't won many games, but they're in it together, and they're fighting for each other, and they're encouraging each other. And you see that every day here at Development Camp. You see that every day in Binghamton, and that kind of energy is just infectious, and that's what's going to help develop a winning culture in New Jersey.
As someone who has spent a lot of time in Binghamton and working with interviewing the prospects, who out of not the main guys when you think of Jack Hughes and Ty Smith and all those guys, should fans be keeping their eye on? Maybe an underrated player. You know how we saw Jesper Bratt come up a couple of years ago and do his thing. Who would you say could be that type of player for this roster?
I think fans need to pay attention to Mchale Malta. He is, in my opinion, one of the best two-way forwards that this organization has in their system. He's been in Russia the past 2 years. He was part of the World Junior team for Team Russia 2 years ago as well, when they unfortunately lost in the semifinals. They finished 6th. It was very disappointing for them. But I feel like himself had a tremendous tournament and really helped launch him into feeling like he could compete. Because it's one thing when you're a young guy playing against men that you don't get a lot of ice time, you don't get a lot of the prime minutes, and you kind of question whether you're capable. And at the World Juniors, he really made a name for himself and set himself apart. And I give him a ton of credit. He actually turned down a 5-year contract to play for his hometown team in St. Petersburg with the likes of Pavel Datsyuk, who is his idol growing up, to come over here and try for a chance to play in the NHL, because that has been his dream. So he turned that down, and he said, no, I want to go and try for the NHL. I'm going to sign with New Jersey. And here he is. So I don't think a lot of fans know all that much about him.
Very fair, yeah, absolutely.
But it's somebody that they should be paying attention to at this development camp, definitely at rookie camp, and potentially even at main camp.
You're hearing down below us, down to the right, you're hearing oohs and ahs. It's all for Jack Hughes.
Scoring goals.
He's scoring goals left and right, and he looks really sharp out there, especially in this small spaces. Well, Julie, you have a unique perspective of having to go watch him overseas. What have you learned about him first as a player, and then we'll talk about him as a person?
Well, what I love about him as a player is that he is always looking to get better. You know, when you have a guy as talented and as skilled as he is, you would think it's easy for him to kind of feel like he knows it all. And that's not the case when it comes to Jack Hughes. He is always working hard. He is always on the ice extra, whether it's early, whether it's late after practice. He's working on his shot. He's always working on his edge work. It's one of those things where he wants...
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, we're just watching
now.
now.
Sorry, we're just all watching.
Well, not only that, but like if you look at, we say like the ice is heavy, like when it's tilted in one way. Well, the stands are heavy because everybody's on this side with Jack Hughes, and who can blame them, you know?
And you mentioned a little bit about like the competitive nature. Amanda, we were talking earlier about just how you watch him play in ping pong yesterday, and like if his teammate misses something, he's like, oh no, like because he's so fired up competitively. It's just really fun to watch.
And that's one of the things. He's a winner. He wants to be a winner no matter what he's doing, and that's the type of person that John Hines and Ray Shero and Tom Fitzgerald and Dan McKinnon are attracted to. They want guys who want to win. And that's not to say that, you know, everyone on the ice doesn't want to win, but there's just something about certain people where you know that they're going to win, they want to win at all costs.
Well, I don't even think it's just that, but he wants everybody else on his team to be as successful as he is.
Yeah.
And so it's not just that he wants to win and he feels like he's the only one who can help the team. He feels that he can help make his teammates better, and I think that is what truly makes Jack special. I mean, you saw it a couple passes, trying to connect with guys, like right there. Thank you, Jack, for illustrating.
Our fans just watched, shielding the puck. He's not a big guy, but he's able to shield the puck with just his skills and his skating. Cuts to the net and then finds the open guy because he's a playmaker. I mean, it's nice that we have the ISO up as we're talking about Jack Hughes, because as we're talking about the things that he does so well, he's doing them on the ice right now in 3-on-3. So, Amanda, let me ask you this, and then Julie as well. What is a win for a prospect coming out of development camp? Is it first impressions on the coaches? Is it just camaraderie? Is it them taking something from it to put into their game? What is a win for a prospect?
I think a win for a prospect is keeping your eyes wide and your ears open throughout this entire experience and extracting as much information as you possibly can. But I think the win comes for a prospect is when they leave here and can apply those things. It's what happens in the weeks after development camp. It's easy to do all the right things when you're here and have the instruction and the nutritionist and the coaches and all that, but it's how you use those things and apply them in the weeks remaining in your summer. That's when you see who's really taking it seriously.
Julie?
For me, I think the win is just being confident in what you're capable of doing. And a lot of that goes to what Amanda said in terms of being able to be a sponge and absorb all of this information and apply it, like she said, into the summer training. But I also feel that it's one of those things where these guys are very often one of, if not the best player on their respective teams at the moment. And so when you come to an event like this where the concentration of talent is that much higher, to know that you feel like you belong at this level is something that is going to help motivate them and encourage them throughout the rest of the season and help them to focus on what they need to do in order to take another step in their career, whether that's just to be an even better player for their junior team or have more ice time in the AHL, or even push for a spot in the NHL.
Well, Julie, we were talking earlier about Ty Smith before you joined us. We'd like to get your opinion on him as well. He's over there on the left side of the ice now, skating around, and he also looks like he's gotten bigger, he's gotten stronger, he's got a nice stride. He looks like he's ready to take that next step to the NHL. What are your observations of him?
Well, for Ty, the biggest challenge for him is he's an incredibly competitive person. And it's one of those things where he came to camp last year, and he knew it was his first camp, and he knew it might have been a long shot, but he came looking to push for an NHL spot. And so he was disappointed that it didn't happen. But then as soon as he was sent back to Spokane, and you'll read about this in the feature that you'll see on NewJerseyDevils.com in the not-too-distant future. He kind of switched flipped the switch really quickly, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that he was going to be the captain in Spokane, and his teammates were so excited to have him back, and that really buoyed his confidence to know that he was a good hockey player and he just needed to take another step. So that's what he focused on this season. He wanted to work on his explosiveness, first step to be able to minimize the gap on the defensive side of things, and be a little more reliable in his own zone. And he also wanted to work, like I said, on the defensive game, and not just be the guy with the puck. And that's the challenge with Ty. He spends most of his time on the ice with the puck. So he doesn't have a lot of practice with his team in Spokane playing in a truly defensive role. So for him, that's going to be the biggest challenge, not only to show here, but to show at rookie camp, and if he wants to have a spot with the Devils, John Hynes will require that.
All right, thanks a lot for joining us, Julie. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have another guest coming up shortly, and we'll have more coverage of the 3-on-3 tournament at the RWJBarnabas Hockey Health House.
It's not easy.
It's not easy to say.
It
It's
took me like 30 years.
RWJBarnabas Health Hockey House at the Prudential Center. I got it that time. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back. Hello, Devils fans, and welcome back to the RWJBarnabas Health Hockey House at the Prudential Center. Chris Westcott and Amanda Stein from NewJerseyDevils.com joining you for live coverage of the 3-on-3 Development Camp Tournament. And we've had a few games going on back and forth. We've already had our first guest of the show, and now we bring in our second guest, Leo Scaglione Jr. with the New York Hockey Journal. Leo, thanks for joining Amanda and I.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, Amanda and I were talking, and we seem to think that you're the man that knows these prospects very well.
Leo's my guy. Anytime I need anything in-depth about a prospect, he's the guy that I go to. You do an awesome job on MSG throughout the year. He's my go-to man. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Pressure's on now.
The pressure's on.
Don't forget the fun facts, though. I'm always good for a fun fact.
That's true. Leo
Fun
is
fact.
very good for fun facts, and sometimes when I'm really strapped for my 10 takeaways, I text Leo. I'm like, hey, Leo.
Hey, you're letting out trade secrets here.
I know.
Okay?
That's okay. I'm like, hey, Leo, can you help me with something here?
Let's be honest, though. I'm probably number 11 more often than not. Yeah.
The 11th takeaway.
I'm on the floor.
Leo Scaglione Jr. Okay, well, Leo, let's talk about some of these guys that you know very well. I mean, you talked about fun facts. Like, who's a guy on this roster that maybe Devils fans aren't looking out for that has an interesting background or story or fun fact?
Well, let's start with one of the players they just drafted a couple weeks ago in defenseman Case McCarthy. This is a very physical blue liner who played the past 2 seasons at the NTDP. His father, Joe, was a member of the U.S. Navy SEALs.
Wow.
And in talking with Coach John Robleski, the U18 coach at the NTDP program, one thing he mentioned is, of course, you're always looking at some of the positives in a player. This is an offensive-minded player, very good defensively. He says he's going to be running a power play at BU in a couple of years. But of course, with that, you're always kind of looking at things that a player can improve.
Absolutely.
And with him, one thing he mentioned was his skating. But he made sure to mention right after that, when you look at this kid's background, when you have a father who has been around for your entire life, always pushing you, developing you, and making sure that you're always responsible, it's something that he's going to work on, and there's zero doubt about it. And I always find things what players' parents do for a living and how that will help them grow and develop. And when you look at the Devils roster, whether it's at the NHL level, American League prospect down the line, so many fathers have played pro hockey, and that's always a benefit.
And one of the things, I had a chance to speak to him yesterday, and one of the things he did say is playing for that team meant so much to him. And he followed that up with, I come from a very patriotic family. So for me, the best, for him, he was saying, the best part about playing for that team was to put on that American flag every day. So you're absolutely right. The family and how they've influenced these prospects play a really big part. Who else do you have on your list as someone who guys should be looking out for?
Entering his junior year at Harvard, Riley Walsh.
Yeah, that's a name we hear a lot.
Yeah, when you think back in 2017, drafted in the 3rd round, it's almost a steal. And when he was drafted by New Jersey, that was the first word that came to mind. This kid is going to be a steal. Offensive-minded. He's a wizard on the power play. He's tremendous on the PP. Very good defensive game. And speaking of a player whose parent played pro hockey, his dad Mike played pro hockey for quite a while. And he mentioned to me yesterday during our interview, growing up, the influence of his father played, of course, such a significant role. But he said, whereas some kids, when they're practicing and they're at the rink, yeah, you're practicing your shot, you're practicing your shooting. But because he played pro hockey for so long, he knew all those extra drills and those extra things that you can do to improve your game, and it's clearly shown.
He's playing against some pretty tough competition. I mean, in college, when you have a guy that goes off to college and he takes that route for his development, how do you find then when they come to the pros, like what areas of their game are usually the most polished in your opinion?
When I think about it, it actually goes more to their mental game, because you're playing against men, you're men, older guys, bigger guys, and you really have to take responsibility, because you're not just whereas maybe when you're in junior, it's hockey all the time. When you're in college, you have to balance school, your studies, and the game. And being able to do that, taking responsibility for that, is a big step. So when they come out of the college program and they become a pro, it's always the mental side that always seems to be improved.
It's almost like nothing phases them, Amanda. I mean, they come in and, you try balancing classes and off-ice workout and on-ice workout and trying to keep your grades up at a place like Harvard. Like, are you kidding me? I mean, that's difficult.
It's actually funny you mention that, because I asked him yesterday, when you look back in your past 2 years at Harvard, what is something off the ice, maybe in the classroom, that sticks out? And he said, you know what, last year I had to take a statistics course.
Oh, boy.
And he says, and I'm not good at math. But he actually tried to use how he approaches the game of hockey and just keep working at it. He was tutored. He was helped. He ended up getting a passing grade. He didn't know exactly what it was, but he thinks it was a B.
Hey, Riley Walsh, I'm on your passing grade is fine for me.
That's why I write. I'm not playing with math.
That's why we're all sitting here today.
That's why we're
for
top.
The passing grade.
Math is not our thing. Maybe some hockey statistics, and that's about it. Well, we talked earlier with our former guests, and then also amongst each other, about a guy like Jack Hughes. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you your thought of Jack Hughes, the player, and what you think of him as a person as well. We've talked a lot about his competitive nature, and you see him out here and he jumps out of the ice, and we're not just saying that because he's the latest storyline. He's jumping out at a tournament like this.
Absolutely. He really stands out. It's almost as if he's been playing in this particular environment 3-on-3s for his entire life. He's just dominating out there. But honestly, one thing that I always try to look at when guys are entering an organization, particularly one that I cover, is how good of an interview is this player going to be? Can I rely on him for quotes? And I tell you, Jack Hughes, he called Ray Shero a beauty when he was in Vancouver. Well, the way he talks and the quotes that he gives you, he's a beauty. And I'm really looking forward to covering him and writing stories about him and watching what he does on the ice. Obviously, what he does on the ice is spectacular, but the things behind the scenes and the other things that he can bring to the organization is fantastic. And it's a really splendid pick by New Jersey. This kid is going to be the face of this franchise for a long time, and it's really fun to watch and see.
Let's talk about some guys who have been in the system for a little bit that maybe fans are, I mean, obviously everyone's familiar with who Jack Hughes is, but who's been around a bit. And I'm looking at the Binghamton roster from last year, and some of the guys are here today and throughout the week. What about Brandon Gignac? He had a really good season last year. He had a very small taste of the NHL. What's the next step for a player like him, and what is his potential?
His potential is very high. The next step for him, I would say, is consistency. You have to do it every single night. Last year, was his second professional season, but it was really only his first full pro year because the previous season he had that brutal knee injury, ACL, MCL surgery. He had to bounce back from that. And the bread and butter of his game has always been his skating. So when you have an injury of that magnitude and you have to recover from that, and skating is such a part of his, I mean, of course it's a part of every hockey player's game, but particularly his, you now have to have the confidence to overcome that. Can I make the cut in this, in the corner? Can I do certain things? And he overcame that last year. But now the question is, now that you did that and you've proven that, can you do it each and every night? Can you, instead of doing it 2 out of every 4 games, 3 out of every 5, can you do it, 4 out of 5 or 9 out of 10, something along those lines?
That's what you need in the NHL.
Yeah. Exactly.
What about Marian Studenic? Because here's a guy who is a little bit quieter, I think, when it comes to fans and what fans know. But I'm really intrigued about this player. Anytime I've spoken to him, you see him on social media, he's a really good player, too. Who is Marian Studenic to you in the scope of what the Devils are doing?
He's a quiet player. He almost flies under the radar, but he's very, very smart. His high hockey IQ is phenomenal. Watching him last year in Binghamton, he floats in the defensive zone, and he's always in the right spot. When you're watching him, he's in the right spot to cut off a pass, cut off a play. And then when the puck is on his stick or he starts coming the other way, you think he's quiet in the D zone doing all the right things, which he is, but when the puck's on his stick, you're out of your seat.
Yeah.
He's dynamic with it. When he gets in the offensive zone, it's really fun to watch him do what he does. So that's kind of the maybe middle 6 type player I could see him being at some point down the line. And again, it goes back to consistency and getting out of some of those other younger player, junior type habits that plague some players at that level. But he's fun to watch.
Here's a guy who is on the ice right now. I think he does have a hockey stick in his hand, but he's not dressed in a jersey. And it's Mark Dennehy, the coach of the Binghamton Devils. This is the first time he's running a development camp, only because he was hired in Bingo on August 1st last year. So development camp was already over. Alain Nasruddin ran a lot of it last year. And for Mark Dennehy, he really had a challenge in his first professional year because every 2 days, he had a different roster based on how many injuries were occurring up in New Jersey. So can you tell us a little bit about who Mark Dennehy is, how he fits in, again, to what the Devils are doing? Because he strikes me as a very similar guy to John Hines.
I'm smiling.
I see you smiling,
I'm smiling as you say that
because I think he doesn't get enough credit.
No, he doesn't. One thing that stands out about Mark is his intensity.
Yeah. Hello, John Hines.
Yeah, that's you know what? When they talk about that seamless transition from the American League club to the NHL club, you could see it in the coaching staff.
Yeah.
And when I think back to when Rick Kowalski was running the American League team for all those years, it was maybe not necessarily systems play, but it was well, actually, it does go back to more systems play and being smart on the ice and making the correct plays. But when you look at the way Dennehy ran the team last year, it was, I want you hard on the puck every play. Be physical. Be on that forecheck. It's very demanding in that way, which is very similar, of course, to what we see in New Jersey.
Yeah.
It's a different type of style than Kowalski. Both styles were tremendous. A lot of fun. I mean, those Albany teams that Kowalski ran were
phenomenal. Yeah.
Dynamic to watch. A couple of really fun playoff runs there. But you can definitely see the transition from more, I mean, there's always smarts involved, but it was more brain under Kowalski and more demand and intensity under Dennehy.
And that's one of the things that Jack Hughes said. Was, he had just met Mark right before yesterday's practice, and he said, wow, he's really intense.
Well, we had a couple of fan questions in here, and we'll get to one right now from Braden Berger, who asks, with PK Subban, Taylor Hall, and Jack Hughes, do you think that because we will have such a strong core, we will be able to take on teams such as the Bruins, Blues, and Sharks next season? Well, Leo, I'll just kick it off to you there. They obviously have done a good job of upgrading their core group of players going into the next season. Obviously, some of their younger players getting better. How do you see the New Jersey Devils matching up against teams like that around the world?
Very well. That's really what it boils down to. Because the Devils, for the past 2 years, and well, really ever since John Hines took over, have always been a very hard team to play against. Now, it's one thing to be a hard team to play against, but you still need the pieces to be successful while doing that. And now you're adding a player like PK Subban on the back end. You bring it defensively, former Norris Trophy winner. You can bring it offensively, of course, as we know. And the thing to remember, too, is, of course, Taylor Hall was out almost all of last season.
Yep.
And you saw how he carried this team on his back 2 years ago. Well, now you how well the Devils did then. Well, let's fast forward 2 years to this upcoming season. You're going to have a healthy Taylor Hall, and he doesn't necessarily have to carry this team on his back now. You have Nico Hischier, who's maturing right before our very eyes, and that's very interesting to watch. Makes me feel old. But then you have a guy like PK Subban, of course, on the back end, and another year under the belt for Will Butcher, too, as some of these younger kids start to take on greater roles, take on more responsibility. And with a healthy Taylor Hall in the mix, they can take on any team. They really can.
Well, you mentioned something there. I used to cover the Edmonton Oilers, and back when Hall was a member of that organization, I feel like early on in his career, he felt he had to be that guy, and he kind of embraced that role early on. But I think now he's at the point in his career where he just wants to win, and he wants his teammates to help contribute, and he wants to be a part of something bigger than himself. And I think that he has a chance to do that year, maybe more so than at any other point in his career.
Yeah, yes, any other point in his career, and you're just seeing the way that Ray Shero is building this roster. We didn't, the addition of Wayne Simmons as well is a huge addition to this team. 1 year, the most favorable contract. It might be $5 million, but think about it. 1 year, no guarantees beyond that. Still so much cap space to play with. I think this roster really in the last 3 months, 4 months, the talent on this roster has doubled. It's done really, Ray Shero and his team have done really well in building and bringing in a lot more talent. And look, it harps back to what Taylor Hall said at the end of the year. We need more talent, and those are things that have been addressed by Ray Shero. Not to say they've only been addressed because Taylor said it. I'm sure they've always been on the same page, but the beautiful thing about the way Ray Shero works is he strikes when the iron is hot. He doesn't make moves for the sake of making moves and to appease to people to say, oh, well, we did something. He waits for the moment to strike, and that's what he's done over the course of the last couple of years. And one of those things that he's been able to do, and I hope you can speak to this, Leo, is he's got Jesper Boqvist under contract.
That he does. But even going back to your whole point about Ray Shero, I was a guest speaker at the Devils fan club actually right after that end of season press conference. And some of the questions directed at me was, I'll just be, very blunt about it. Why is Ray Shero still here? What's he doing? Yeah. Should he be fired? And I'm looking and I'm thinking, absolutely not. If anything, and I said this on Twitter once after the Devils lost at Madison Square Garden in March, someone tweeted at me something along the same vein. And I said, you know what? Actually, Ray Shero deserves a raise. Because when you look at the roster that he inherited and the way that he has turned this entire system, not just Devils organization in New Jersey, but the entire system around has been tremendous. And you think back to last year, he's not diving into the free agent market, throwing all of these contracts around. Well, one of the contracts went to Calvin DeHaan, and he was traded. So there's your case in point of why you're not throwing money and killing your cap space. You wait, and then you pounce. Enter Taylor Hall, enter PK Subban. And when you look at the contract for Wayne Simmons, this is a show me what you can do type of contract for Wayne after he had a difficult season last year. And it's the perfect type of way that Shero has conducted business in New Jersey. He looks around, sees, all right, which player needs a chance to prove himself. Go back to Kyle Palmieri. His first draft at the helm is a player who wasn't getting his ice time in Anaheim, grabs him, and now he's a star here, back in his home state, of course. So that's one thing that I definitely can't speak of with Ray is he's not throwing money around. He's not wasting years and putting yourself into a terrible hole. It's be patient. He's been saying that since day one, and you're about to see it pay off.
And I think one of the really important things that you mentioned that I've mentioned too in the past is that when Shero and Tom Fitzgerald all came in, they weren't just coming in to tinker with an NHL roster. They were here to almost reboot a franchise. And when you reboot a franchise, you're talking about building what happens in New Jersey. You're talking about building what's happening in Binghamton. There are so many levels to this. It takes time. And patience is a virtue, and patience, I think, is finally paying off. We're seeing the fruits of that labor. And, I mean, it's all right in front of us here, right at development camp. Look at how many top prospects there are. But I did mention before Jesper Boqvist, and that's one of the questions that we keep getting on Twitter. So I really want to address that. Here's a guy that before he signed, I think every day I was fielding Twitter questions, Chris. Is Boqvist signed yet? Is he signed yet? What is he doing? What do you know about Jesper Boqvist and what his opportunities can be here in New Jersey.
Well, he'll be one of the players competing for a spot this fall, no question about that. This is a player who, he's probably one of the fastest players in this camp, maybe second right behind Jack Hughes. That's how quick this guy is. And the thing is, with his skating, he's effortless with it.
Yeah.
Very elegant skater. I was chatting with Tom Fitzgerald towards the end of last season, and he started laughing when I brought up Jesper Boquist. He says the way this guy skates, it's a thing of beauty. And the way this guy glides is faster than when I was skating at my top speed during my playing days. So that's what brings out, those are the top parts of Jesper Boquist's game. And one thing they did want him to work on, and this will continue into next season, is driving the net. When you're playing on the international rinks, it's a little bit bigger. You have to be a little bit more, you have to find those tighter spaces on the North American rink, drive the net, go through traffic. That's something they wanted to work with him on as he moved forward, and one of the things they wanted him to improve. But when it comes to his skating, when it comes to his compete, when it comes to what he can do with the puck offensively, I'd be very surprised if he's not in the NHL at some point this upcoming season. Of course, that's if he stays in North America.
Well, he is shifty is a word I think of.
That's an
That's a
excellent
good
word
one.
to use,
Yeah.
yes.
It's skating. He's, like you said, he's got this elegance to his skating, but this shiftiness, I think, is going to help him when it comes to getting better at those small areas of the ice. And that's a transition. It takes time coming to the North American game, but I think it's one that, a transition that he's getting ready to make, and I think he's ready to make. So we have to wrap up because we have another guest coming, but we could talk with you forever. Leo Scaglione.
We're going to come back to you, all season long.
Yeah,
so
I'll be here.
We already know, Amanda said, you are her inside source for the 11th
really shouldn't have
takeaway.
said that.
And it's live. It's out there. But we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have another guest. We are live from the RWJBarnabas Health Hockey House at the Prudential Center. And we'll be right back on NewJerseyDevils.com. Hello, Devils fans, and welcome back to the 3-on-3 tournament here at the Devils Development Camp. We're bringing you live coverage from the RWJBarnabas Health Hockey House at the Prudential Center. Chris Westcott and Amanda Stein. We've been joined by several special guests today, and the finals are happening now below us, so it's almost wrapping up. We bring in another guest, Abby Mastracco from NorthJersey.com. Abby, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Abby, we were going to mention, this is our first real long look on the ice at Jack Hughes, and you've had a chance to talk with him as well in the media scrums, and then you, of course, were at the draft in Vancouver. What are some of your early observations of Jack Hughes?
Observations on the ice right now is he's making guys look silly. It's exactly what Mark Dennehy said yesterday. He makes this look easy. You get him into open ice, and he's just dazzling out there. In terms of some of the off-ice stuff, he's so polished and he's so mature, and he's been really great to deal with, but I'm still sort of in awe of just his composure and his poise, and some of that probably comes from the family background and growing up in hockey, but I mean, even talking to his family the last couple of weeks, Quinn seems really mature too, and his parents are very down to earth. He's very impressive.
Well, fans, as you pay attention now, Amanda had to run down. She's going to do a post-game interview after the final here, but we have Abby Mastracco from NorthJersey.com joining me right now. If you have a question for Abby or myself, hit us up on the hashtag on Twitter, hashtag NJD3V3. Abby, you were just talking about just how he's standing out. He's making guys look silly. That's not even a negative on the guys he's performing against. It's just that his edge work, his skating is just at a whole nother level. When you think of him transitioning to the NHL, what are your thoughts on the type of impact a guy like Jack Hughes could have year one?
I think his vision that, this team needs some scoring depth. They need some dynamic playmaking. You win being deep up the middle in the NHL right now, and I think he's going to, let's say he plays with somebody like a Jesper Bratt on his wing. Jesper's such a dynamic skater. I think he can be able to thread the needle and make some plays that we're not going to see coming, and other people on the ice aren't necessarily going to see coming as well either. He just does so much out there that you look at him and you're like, what is he doing? Where's he going with this? Oh, wow, that worked out. How did he do that? And you have to rewind it a few times.
He's processing things ahead of his opponents.
Yes.
And he sees plays that we up top aren't really noticing. And then all of a sudden, he scored a goal earlier on in the game here when he was down on the far right, where he bent low around the corner, and he saw a guy that was streaking to the back of the net that was really tucked away behind a bigger prospect. He saw that guy. And Hughes is not a big guy. He saw him. He knows how to make plays.
He had a pretty good move going around Brattini, and Brattini's pretty quick. And it was almost like Cini had to stop for a minute because he couldn't quite keep up with just what Jack was doing around him and where he was going.
So for you follow the Devils all year long, 24/7, 365. They've had a pretty impactful offseason. They bring in a guy by the name of PK Subban.
Yeah.
And then they bring in a guy by the name of Wayne Simmonds. These guys are established, excellent NHL hockey players. When you bring in guys like that in an offseason, how does that raise the level of excitement in the fan base, but also just maybe even as a media member go, oh, I might be covering something special this year?
Yeah, even talking to some of the guys in the room yesterday, some of the younger prospects, they're really excited about what's going on right now too. And I talked to Michael McLeod and Joey Anderson, and they said it just feels different right now. There's a different buzz, a different energy than the development camp last year when it was, they were coming in as new kids, well, McLeod wasn't new, but Joey Anderson last year was his first development camp with the Devils. There's a different sort of energy, and it's exciting right now. And the level has been raised a little bit in terms of sort of the profile with the Devils. PK brings a lot of notoriety, but he brings a lot of skill on the ice as well. I think him and Simmonds are really going to help boost the power play. That was pretty inconsistent last season, and that hurt the Devils a lot at times. And I think those two acquisitions, between skill and veteran leadership and sort of marketability, are going to make this, this team already looks a lot different than it did last year. And like I said, it feels different.
When you get a guy like Wayne Simmonds, you expect him to make some pretty decent money on the free agent market, even with a down year. But he comes in here on a one-year, $5 million prove-it deal. When you get a guy of that talent, a guy who's a former All-Star, a guy who can score 27, 28, 30 goals, what does that do for your team to know that you have a guy who's on a prove-it deal. He's looking to make an impact because he doesn't know where his future is beyond that. He's got the one-year deal.
Well, he's hungry. And, you know, both him and PK are in similar situations where they have to show that last year was sort of an aberration for them, and they're going to be able to get back to their career numbers. But the thing with both of them is they dealt with some injuries last season. They're now healthy. They've got a full off season. You know, Simmons didn't have a full off season last year. He had surgery. I think those two both, yes, like we said, they're going to be hungry, but they're healthy, and that's the biggest part of it. And so they're going to be able to come here day one of training camp, make an impact.
You make calculated risks on guys, right? I mean,
yeah.
The rest of the league may look at these, they're injured, but like you said, they're healthy now. And they're both hungry, and you want to see that. You see the way that they're performing in the offseason, the work that they're putting in, and they're ready to make an impact. And that's only good for an organization. When you take swings on guys, you need to take swings on guys who are hungry and motivated and ready to make an impact. So, Abby, I ask you another one. Biggest X factor for the New Jersey Devils heading into this season, if something goes right for them, something clicks for them, they'll make the playoffs. What do you think it is?
The biggest X factor? That's a good question. This team has a really strong culture, and they all play together. And look, I've covered a lot of teams in a lot of different sports, and I've seen a lot of really talented teams that are disjointed, and I've seen them make it to a certain level of the playoffs and not be able to push past that because they don't know how to play for each other and play together. This team knows how to do that. Last year, they may not have had the talent to necessarily get them far enough, and they did have a lot of injuries. You know, losing Taylor Hall really hurt. But what this team does is they know how to play together and play with one another. There is a very strong culture that John Hines and Ray Shero have established, and if you have the right talent in place, that can take you far. Granted, things need to go right. They need to stay healthy. The power play needs to be a lot better than it was last year, but I think that culture is really going to take them far if they have the talent.
All right, thanks, Abby. Give fans that are listening a little hint of what you're working on this week at development camp.
Working on some prospect stuff. Jesper Boquist, I think, is an interesting one. Some of these other veteran guys, maybe not so much veteran, but the ones who ended the season in the NHL last year, like Bastian and McLeod, where they're maybe going to fit next year now that there's some new acquisitions. A couple things like that. A lot of prospect stuff this week, though. All
right, thanks a lot, Abby, for joining me. And you can find her work at northjersey.com. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll wrap things up here from the RWJBarnabas Health Hockey House at the Prudential Center. All right, thanks everyone for joining us from the RWJBarnabas Health Hockey House at the Prudential Center. We've been live all morning long for the 3-on-3 development camp tournament. Amanda Stein and Chris Westcott have joined you along with some special guests. Amanda's down on the ice. She's doing the post-game interview with the winning team. Jack Hughes' team in the white there, they just won the tournament. And that's it for today's live broadcast. Thank you everyone for joining us. We have a ton of coverage coming up from this event and all the events throughout the week at NewJerseyDevils.com. So for now, we say goodbye. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, thanks a lot, Devils fans.